A young and beautiful woman sat in her office with a pensive expression on her face. She looked in the mirror on her desk. As always, she was beautiful, but she looked tired, and no wonder. The deal was not easy, but still, it was done. However, Laura's thoughts were not about the deal. Today she received an invitation to a meeting of former classmates. Former classmate Kimberly wrote on social networks, "Laura, we're having a party on June 17th to celebrate the 10th anniversary of graduation. We would love to see you." Laura thought with surprise that 10 years had already passed since then, and wiped away an unwanted tear. And the tears were not tears of nostalgia. It so happened that Laura's most horrible memories were associated with the school years. Just the thought of them made Laura shiver, though it was warm in the office. The message from the head bully of her class looked like a mockery. Back then, years ago, her classmates had laughed at her poverty, and now they suddenly wanted to see her. Laura was pleased to note that Kimberly didn't look good. Her page was closed, but her former classmate's face on her avatar didn't look good. But she had once been the best-looking girl in her class. "Well, why am I hesitating then?" grinned Laura to herself. "Of course, I'll come and show you what I've become. I'll give you a real surprise." Quietly for herself, Laura was immersed in memories. She tried her best to push them away, but there was no way. Laura disliked to talk about her childhood. So few people knew that it was hard and joyless. Her life would probably have turned out differently if not for a terrible event. It divided Laura's life into before and after. Laura's parents got into a terrible car accident. A drunk driver drove into the oncoming traffic lane, and the collision was inevitable. The father died immediately. The mother was a little luckier. At that time, Laura was learning to write letters in the 1st grade, and she had no idea that she no longer had a father, and her mother's life hung by a thread. Aunt Margaret picked Laura up from school that day. "Where's Mum?" asked the girl frightenedly, as if sensing trouble. "Oh, Sylvia and Paul aren't here yet," answered the aunt, and her voice trembled. But at the time, Laura couldn't give it much thought. Her mother had suffered lacerations to her face from shards of glass. Doctors pulled her from the other world and literally put her back together in pieces. But the young woman became blind. When Laura saw her mother with a bandage over her eyes, she screamed wildly. The blindfold looked too ominous. Laura had only once seen her mother cry, but more than once she heard her silent weeping when she thought no one could see her. Many years later, when Laura was already an adult and successful, her mother admitted that if it were not for Laura, she would not have survived. There was practically nowhere to wait for help. Sylvia had no relatives. Paul's parents lived thousands of miles away on the other side of the country. In addition, they were very old, so the young widow did not rely on their help. Sometimes Aunt Margaret visited them, but it was not long. Soon she met her future husband and left for another city with him. "I have to settle my life," she said once. "Girls, please don't be offended." However, they had a lot to thank her for. After all, it was her merit that Laura had not been taken into an orphanage. Sometimes a neighbour helped them. Mrs. Romero cooked meals, helped with cleaning, braided pigtails for Laura, so they managed to live on. Laura was one of the best students in school, but a year after the car accident, her classmates began to treat her with disdain and mock her. The reason was her poor clothes. At first it was silly, but generally harmless jokes. Laura tried not to pay attention to them. But over time, the bullying of her classmates became more sophisticated. The situation was aggravated by Laura's slight obesity. No, she was not fat. She was just tall and big. "Cowgirl, tramp, pauper," heard Laura in her direction. and at such moments her eyes invariably filled with tears. But she mentally said to herself, "Just don't cry, that's what they're waiting for." Deep down, Laura knew her peers were right. All of her clothes came from second-hand and cheap stores. Perhaps if she had been more slender, even a sack from potatoes would have looked great on her. But alas, she was what she was. "How was school?" asked her mother often. She guessed that the classmates might easily make fun of Laura, but she couldn't help because she didn't have any extra money for her daughter's outfits. "Oh, everything is fine, Mum. We have a very friendly class, all right." But the mother's heart can't be fooled. "You know, Laura, I've been thinking maybe I should get a job. At the Blind Society we were told about how people make beads, earrings, and weave all kinds of meshes. Why don't I try?" So Sylvia started making handsome costume jewellery, and she succeeded. Laura often came home from school and helped her mother. Occasionally they were joined by their faithful neighbour, Mrs. Romero. Laura delivered the completed items to stores or art salons. Mrs. Romero advised to sell them at the market, but Laura rejected that idea at once. "What if my classmates see me there? I have no normal life at school, even without it," she thought, and said aloud, "Oh no, after school I usually have no strength left." The handmade goods, though infrequent, but were bought. Of course it was a modest sum, but some kind of income. In 8th grade, Laura fell in love with Rick, the son of rich parents, the main playboy at school. She knew that Rick was friends with Kimberly, but continued to dream of how she and Rick walk down the street holding hands, and then he kisses her, proposes, falling on one knee and giving her a ring. The graduation party was approaching. Laura would like to be stunning. What if Rick, seeing how pretty she was, will pay attention to her, ask her to dance, and then love and a beautiful wedding? With the money she had saved from the sale of the beads, Laura bought an inexpensive but cute dress. "Hey, Lady Bum!" exclaimed Rick when he saw Laura. "What's that rag you're wearing?" Next to him, Kimberly stood in a stunning outfit and giggled nastily. The rest of the classmates also came up, anticipating the show. "Guys, let's take a picture," called the class teacher. "Just don't stand next to that beggar, or she'll ruin the photo because of her miserable appearance," laughed one of the classmates. "Have you heard what people are saying?" Rick said when he heard those remarks. "Get out of here, ragamuffin." Laura turned around and, hiding her tears, walked away. No one tried to get her back. She wandered around the city half the night, and when she got home and her mother asked how the prom went, the girl replied that everything was wonderful and went to her room. Laura cried into her pillow the rest of the night and swore that one day her classmates would regret everything. Amazingly, the next day it was as if God had rewarded Laura for all her suffering. "Laura, are you awake already? I have wonderful news." She heard her mother's voice. "I got a call from the art salon. Some rich foreigner bought our jewellery, and he ordered more." "How great!" exclaimed Laura, and threw herself on her mother's neck. From that day on, things in their family went uphill. George had lived for many years in Great Britain and came here on business. He was touched by Laura's and her mother's story and said, "I'll help you. Once I was poor too, but now I do not need anything, and you'll be fine." And George had not deceived. Now Laura owns 2 clothing and accessory stores in the capital city. Sylvia underwent the most complicated surgery in Israel, and now she can see with one eye. As for Laura's overweight, that too has faded into oblivion. After training with the best trainers, any model would envy Laura's figure. Shaking off the remnants of memories, Laura firmly decided, "I'm going. I've been waiting for this for a long time." A meeting of former classmates was already in full swing at the restaurant. Live music was playing. The room was decorated with balloons and flowers. Our beggar girl isn't here yet, remarked Kimberly. Does it bother you that much? Grinned Rick. No, it's just interesting. I invited her, and I even wrote her what restaurant the party would be at. I guess she can't afford it, said Kimberly. She's probably just sitting in some hovel with a drunken hobo now, laughed Rick. But suddenly, a slender, dark-haired beauty in a gorgeous, shimmering dress entered the scene. Well, who missed me here? Didn't you wait to me? Said Laura and laughed, seeing how stunned everyone in the room was. Don't be angry, my dears, but I did a little research about you, and I made a surprising discovery. It turns out that none of you, with a few exceptions, have achieved success. Kimberly, is it possible to get so fat? At your age? Do you remember when you used to call me fat? Yes, you laughed at that time, and now I'll laugh. You don't mind, do you? Kimberly blushed but did not answer. Meanwhile, Laura came down from the stage and approached Rick. It was pathetic to look at him. His front teeth were missing, and his baldness and shortness of breath made Rick look like an ugly drunken man. Laura knew that he had gone downhill since his parents' death. So, Rick, who's the beggar and bum now? She asked with a tender smile. The people present felt uncomfortable. They were ready to fall under the ground. Everyone stopped laughing all at once. In the silence, Laura confidently opened a bottle of Dom Perignon and poured herself a glass. Okay, my dears, I'll drink this glass to you and to myself. She drank to the bottom and looked around slowly and said, Oh, and by the way, don't worry. As usual, I'm not going to spoil your party or the pictures with my presence. So, eat, drink and be merry. And I have to go. Business is not waiting. I have numerous achievements ahead of me. Have a good time, and yes, I expect an invitation to the next party. After this speech, Laura walked out with her head held high, while everyone was looking silently in her wake. Now, Laura has finally let go of the past.